Let's do it.
Nobody's saying anything stupid.
Yeah, that's right. If you say anything stupid, ones of people will hear it. All right. Okay, we're I think we're going to start with the beginning of Luke 6. And by way of some review, I was just looking through these various and sundry things that I make. I got in trouble on one of these in my Sunday school class because I was trying to picture in Romans the old realm of Moses and the new realm of Jesus, law versus faith. And I really totally botched it. And I ended up having to call a friend of mine in Washington, D.C. or Washington State, who's retired, to help me straighten it out. So maybe we'll look at that some other time. But anyway, some of these really work. I really think this started out as a 3-circle diagram 25 years ago. It was promise, anticipation, and fulfillment. And I started thinking about how things work in Luke and Acts. And it really is more like this. You have the promise, everybody's ripe with anticipation, like when John the Baptist comes in. They know something's going to happen, they're not sure what it is. There's announcement from John the Baptist and from Jesus, the most famous being Mark chapter 1, verse 14. The time is fulfilled. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe the gospel. It's a straightforward announcement, of which he is both the messenger and the message. He both proclaims the message and is the fulfillment that he proclaims. He just doesn't say it that way at the time. And so then there's fulfillment, and then there's after the fact, when people can finally figure it out, what happened, because human beings are terrible at figuring out what's going to happen, get it wrong every single time. That's when the proclamation happens. In retrospect, on reflection after the fact. And that's Acts. So Luke is fulfillment. I mean, Acts is fulfillment too, but it's also now you're into the circle. You're into the reflection and proclamation stage. More promise of the future coming. So we're kind of in this period of reflection, anticipation, and anticipation. That's where we are right now, between the two appearances. That's how I think of it. That's one way of thinking of it. Not the only right way, but it is a way. So in Luke, we're now in the midst of in both anticipation and fulfillment. He is announcing, Luke chapter 4, the Spirit of, there's this moment of anticipation. He gets up and he's going to speak, and all the eyes of the synagogue are on him. So it's very, very anticipatory for the audience. And he starts reading from the scroll of Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and so on and so forth. And then he just announces it. This is the way it's announced in Luke. Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing, or something like that. So Mark has that kingdom of heaven is at hand, kingdom of God is at hand statement. Luke has that reading of Isaiah, which really sets the stage for the rest of the book of Luke, because the whole book resonates with Isaiah from start to finish. And it comes to a crescendo in chapter 24 with the crucifixion. There's so many allusions to Isaiah. He doesn't even need to quote. How many quotes are there from Isaiah? There's not that many, but it's just, the book is just resonates with Isaiah, backlit by Isaiah. So anyway, that's me ad-libbing. This is why I practice so much when I speak in front of churches, so I don't do exactly what I'm doing right now, because we just lost 6 minutes or something right here, 4 or 5 minutes. But back to this thing. This is what I'm going to talk about at Covenant Life in a few weeks, if I can ever figure it out. I'll probably change it many times. Anyway, let's go down one more. This one. I'd have to show the whole thing. So I'm real big on these symbols of Jewish identity. I changed it actually a little bit. N.T. Wright calls it the chief symbols of Israel's national identity in his book, New Testament and the People of God, which I highly recommend to everybody. Well, I added one. These are his these are three of these are his: Abraham, Moses, and Canaan. He calls them the covenant with Abraham, the law of Moses, the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. But I noticed that they all have names. They all have a name, a human being associated with them. Abraham, Moses, Joshua. I added David because I don't think an Israelite could understand himself apart from the idea that the rightful heir to the throne of David was sitting on the throne. And then the last one is the temple, Solomon. So there's a thing and there's a person that goes with it in each case. But we are, it's funny with the Gospels, because what you're seeing is the ultimate contradiction of the great, what I call the great reversal, enthronement through crucifixion. The path to enthronement lay right straight through the cross and then onto the resurrection. If you're going to be resurrected and exalted, then you have to have died in the first place. And in his case, that meant crucifixion. So that's the story. We're still 3 chapters away from him setting his face to go to Jerusalem, but the cross sits as the destiny. And in a sense, he's biding time. And it almost reads like that. He went about. He's just going about. One day he's here, another day he's there. Then he moved on to this city. Then he took a boat and he went across the lake and he was in a tombs. Then he comes back. It's just like that. It's not, there's no identifiable itinerary in the Galilean ministry until he sets his face to go to Jerusalem in in Luke chapter 9. Then he wanders around some more, going here and there on his way down. He finally gets to Jerusalem, and I forget when, 19 is the entry into Jerusalem. Then it's on. Then there's an itinerary, an identifiable type itinerary. There's a what do you want to call it? It's not just penciled in now, it's written in stone. And so he's controlling the pace of the events to a certain extent, completely, I guess, during that last week. Up till then, he just kind of is doing his own thing. And he's managing the conflict, which we're going to get into tonight. Lots of division, lots of conflict. Pharisees and in a little while, chief priests will show up to create conflict, and he will not shy away from it. He will respond in kind, and you'll begin to see that show up as one of the major themes of the book. Division and conflict, sifting, separating wheat from chaff, if you will, that sort of thing. A lot of that in Luke, a lot of that in all the Gospels. So, anybody got anything to say about all that? Or any of that? That's going to pass for an intro after a couple of months off. I like the highlighting. I do it now for reasons that I didn't do it before. When you highlight words, patterns show up. And so as you look at this right here, there's a word that keeps popping up suddenly for the first time. And that word, of course, is Sabbath. So suddenly in chapter 6, the Sabbath becomes front and center, and it will be the main point of contention between Jesus and the Pharisaical class for the rest of the book. So you got to think about, what was the importance of the Sabbath? Why did these people have such a problem with his approach to the Sabbath? I mean, he's just healing somebody. It's not like he's mowing the lawn on the Sabbath or something. If you want to see another good example of this, Sunday school people have seen this many times, but I was noticing it we're doing Romans 3 right now. But if you look at Romans 3, this is what the highlighting is worth. 2. Chapter 2. But right there, judgment, 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 judge, judge, judgment. Boom, 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 boom. Law. Law, 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 law. Circumcision.
Wow.
Yeah, it just screams right out. It just sits right out at you. It's right in your face. Yeah. So you got to think about that. That's deliberate and, helps guide a little bit what you should be it helps constrain you what you should be focusing on when you're studying these books. So in this case, it is the Sabbath that you got to think about, at least in the first part. And then cleansing is going to become an issue. And then we'll move on from there. So let's go ahead and deal with this. There's two Sabbath stories in a row here. So let's do the first one, 1 through 5.
Now it happened, then as he was passing through some grain fields on a Sabbath, and his disciples were picking the heads of the grain, rubbing them in their hands and eating the grain. Some of the Pharisees said, "Why do you do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus answered them and said, "Have you not even read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered into the house of God and took and ate of the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for any to eat except priests alone, and gave it to his companions. And he was saying to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath."
So in this particular case, Luke is not yet interested in how the Pharisees responded to this. Later on, that's not going to be the case. There's going to be, some straws that break the camel's back. But here, there's a lesson, there's a teaching there's something to learn. You can ask the question, what is the lesson he wants to teach here? Or you can ask the question, what does this communicate about who Jesus thinks he is, and about his mission, and about what he's saying about his own traditions. Because in some sense here, they certainly think he's subverting their traditions about the Sabbath. And it seemed, and notice this, they're criticizing the disciples. Remember, the disciples are Orthodox. So he's got these Orthodox Jews, Peter, James, John, so on and so forth, doing probably what they would have considered unlawful before they knew Jesus. So now his disciples are out in their mind engaged in lawbreaking. They never respond. The disciples, they ask Jesus, why are you're responsible, Rabbi, because they do consider him a rabbi. Why are you teaching your disciples that they can break the law like this? And his response isn't, no, they're not breaking the law. He's not necessarily redefining the law. He makes an appeal to a contradiction. The fact that David, by their standard, would be a lawbreaker. But nobody's ever said that. Pharisees, you've never taught that before in your teaching, that David was a lawbreaker. So he can do it, but they can't. And not only that, but if you go back and read that story, that happens to be in First Samuel. You remember the original context? Why was David where was David when he was eating the showbread? Anybody remember? He was running away from Saul. I'm going from memory here. And he went in, this is early, he went into the sanctuary where was the priest. I forgot his name. Begins with an A, because they all begin with an A. And he pretended like he was on a mission from Saul. So not only did he take the showbread, the bread of the presence, he kind of lied. He engaged in some kind of subterfuge to get it to happen. That's the original story. And so that's what he's talking about right here. But that's not the main reason he's bringing up David. He's bringing up David. There's a connection. Now you got to think, what's the connection between Jesus and David? Why would he appeal to David as the example? I don't know that he's ever done that in this book.
Ahimelech.
Ahimelech. Did you look it up?
21, chapter 21.
Chapter 21, yeah. So the way that story ends, of course, Saul finds out that in his mind, he helped David, but he thought David was on a mission from Saul. So he has all the priests, except for one, executed. Anybody remember the name of the guy that executes him? He couldn't get any of his own Israelites to do it. So he got the Edomite Doeg to do it for him. He was the hatchet man. So they executed all the priests, fulfilling the curse that was pronounced on Eli at the beginning of the book. Anyway, that's all backdrop for this. I think it's worthwhile to know a little bit about that sort of thing. And plus, it's just fascinating reading. It's great narrative. Okay, so right off the bat here, chapter 6, we're barely into it in terms of his ministry. It started in chapter 4. Sabbath keeping as a stand-in for law keeping as a stand-in for almost everything. To be an Israelite, to be a faithful Israelite meant to stay within the confines of the Mosaic law. And by this point in the history of Israel, Sabbath keeping was one of the big tells about law, the faithfulness to the law, the Mosaic law. Sabbath keeping and fasting will become an issue. In other words, public displays of piety, the piety that people can see in front of them. So you had to let people had to know that you were fasting. And so how would they know that you were fasting? Well, you dress different, you take on a different countenance, and he's going to have teaching about all that. Sabbath keeping is the same way. You have these sort of Sabbath police, making a show of the fact that they're, somehow not breaking the Sabbath by their standards. Nowhere. Well, that's not true. So in the original context, you were not allowed to, the Israelites got in trouble because they were collecting the manna, and it went rotten on them, to make the point. But here, so they're doing two things actually. They're doing two things wrong. First of all, they're plucking the grains, and secondly, they're not washing their hands. So they're violating purity laws. That would be my guess as well. It's all offensive to the Pharisees. But mostly it's the fact that their rabbi, who was responsible, they blame the rabbi, Jesus. And so they confront him on it, and then we don't get the response from them. All right. So it wasn't what they were doing, it was when they were doing it. But it's interesting how Luke makes Sabbath keeping front and center for the conflict with the Pharisees, and also for faith their standard of law keeping, of faithfulness in Israel. Notice what he says right here. He says, ouch. Have you not read? The implied insult. The Pharisees right there, the doctors of the law, they got their scribes there. I mean, they know the law, and he accuses them of not knowing the law. Have you not read? The law being the whole thing.
Is the point of this to point out the hypocrisy of them, or is it to make the point that Simon is like Sabbath, or is it both?
It depends on how you go with it. I think that at the top level, the point would be that there's a new era. He just came off the wineskin thing.
Okay.
There's a new era. There's an upending of the ways that these people have been looking at things that will continue on for the rest of the book. And this is prime example. He shatters in this one single act, which was not lost on him, I'm sure. He shatters their comfortable perception of what faithfulness looks like, what covenant keeping looks like. He just shatters it, and their authority. I mean, they're the law police, and he's not only is he not doing what they say, he's basically accusing them of not even understanding their own holy word. Have you not read? He says that more than once, I think. That statement right there. Have you not even read? The implied answer is no, which they have, of course, so they should know. So that's at one level, at the highest level. He's upending, he's overturning, and then there's a new era ushering in that's inconsistent with the old one that it's replacing. And I think the wineskin, this is related to the wineskin thing like that. Yeah. So you don't put new wine into old wineskins. If the old wineskins are this kind of approach to covenant keeping, what he's bringing in is incompatible with that. And now there's this lesson of that in what happened in this instance, which would be then Luke's point as well. So in this case, you have Jesus meaning something, and you have Luke meaning something, and it just so happens that in at least one way, they both mean the same thing. Sometimes the the author will mean something a little different from what the speaker, he will use it differently from what the speaker means, and sometimes he will mean it exactly the same way. And this is a case where I think they are both. What Jesus means when he says it is roughly what Luke means when he, in his narrative. You guys are behind the times, Pharisees. That's all changing. If you think that's a problem, just wait, because there's some more things coming that, and it's all heading him towards the cross. Because they want the old. So in chapter 4, he cast out a demon on the Sabbath. I don't think there was any opposition to him then. Report keeps spreading, and part of what would be spreading would be his lack of Sabbath keeping. So maybe they're here. Why are they even here? I mean, the Pharisees just happen to be there, or are they watching him? We're going to find out in a minute. They're watching him, so they're already on the alert. They already don't like it, or they're evaluating him. Maybe he's one of us. Maybe he's already preached on resurrection, so they think he's one of them because of resurrection. So they're evaluating him. Who is this person? Are we going to welcome him into we're going to validate him, we're going to sanction him, and this is what they get: Sabbath breaking in their minds. Jesus is subverting the established Pharisaical norm of Sabbath keeping as boundary keeping. Inside that boundary was where you find the faithful, and they define it. They establish the boundary. They're the ones that make the laws about what constitutes Sabbath keeping. And you can bet your life those laws favor them. And if you want to participate in this, this religious society and social society, which are married together, then you better do it their way. They own it. And he's not submitting to it. Sabbath was not given as a requirement for covenant keeping, if you remember. Why was the Sabbath given? Why was the Sabbath given? What's the purpose of the Sabbath?
Because God rested.
Rest. This never stated that it's a litmus test for covenant keeping. It's for them to rest one day a week because they work hard or something. And so rest. There's no mandate to worship. By definition, there's no mandate to do anything, but it was not given as another set of independent laws that he was going to pick through and make sure you were faithful, as like a list, like a 10 commandments of the Sabbath. The point was rest, and they worked it all into this and other messes with regard to the oral traditions that Jesus is going to attack, which maybe that's what's behind the old wineskin thing, that set of traditions. That's at front and center right here. Was it unlawful to pluck grain from a field in Moses' day? Would it have been considered Sabbath breaking to pluck them and just eat them? I don't know. But it seems to me there's the spirit of the thing, which they've completely lost. That's gone. Remember the commandment, right? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. How does that go? What do they mean by holy?
Set apart. 7 days, the Sabbath of the Lord your God, and you should not do any work, you should your son or your daughter, your male, your cattle, your sojourner stays with you, and 6 days live in the heavens of the earth. So you don't have to rest in the 7th day.
That's it. Very, very, very simple, very straightforward. So it would have left a lot of room for just exactly when are we violating the Sabbath? At what point? Does that mean we just have to sit?
I'm pretty sure there's more about it later.
There is. I just maybe we'll go look at that since I've been caught off guard here because I'm not ready to talk about the Sabbath. But anyway, that's the issue at hand. it will continue to be so. Okay, we'll let that go for a while and continue with more Sabbath. All right. 6 through
12 or 6 through 11.
6 through 11.
On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would go on the Sabbath, so they might find a reason to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts, and he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come and stand here." And he rose and stood there. And Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to destroy it?" And after looking around at them all, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus.
Yeah, so what is the issue here? I mean, this is in your face.
Yeah.
Look at the pause built into the video, if you will, if you're gonna see this on a video. Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to destroy it? You can hear the dead silence, deafening silence. Nobody, he just looks around at it, probably daring anyone to say anything. And nobody says anything. So he doesn't even answer the question. He answers the question by performing an act. It's enacting the new age, right? And a new understanding of things like Sabbath keeping. It says nothing. It has nothing to say, no prohibitions apparently towards doing good or saving lives. And then he's going to have that great in your face where which one of you that loses a sheep falls in the pit, doesn't go down and immediately get it. So that I think is, so these two stories, it notches up the tension, right? It's a definitive statement about the Sabbath in a sense, and their misunderstanding of it and overturning the traditional understanding of it. And then also, this is the event that they have made up their minds that he is not one of us. And we're gonna do something about it. It's this rage, right? Filled with fury, filled with rage. And they're already in chapter 6 talking about what they're going to do about it. And it will now follow him around for whatever it is, 20 chapters, not 20, 14 chapters or so till 19. And they're not going to get it. So at this point, the Sabbath was acting as a barrier to the man's healing. Their boundary marker was preventing a man, would have prevented a man from being healed. And he wasn't going to tolerate that. In fact, he was going to use it as what we might call an enacted parable. But they didn't get it. All right, that's what I got on this. The verse 11 kind of foreshadows where the story's going. You can already tell that he's going to be rejected. The story of Jesus is the story of rejection. And we already know, we've already had a hint, but at this point, we already know by verse 11 of chapter 6 that he will be rejected. If you never knew anything else about it, if you never knew the story at all, you wouldn't have to get past this verse to know there's nothing coming in the way that's going to fix the situation. Because he's not interested in that. He's not interested in compromise, settling the dispute, getting together for a moderation, an arbitration, making himself, not only is Jesus not interested in making himself understood per se, he will use parables that are deliberately designed to cover, to hide. Not behind, but to hide his meaning, because that's reserved. Disclosure is reserved for his own disciples, but for them out there, he throws the seed. He preaches the gospel. He does it in not vague, but elusive terms, with parables that are hard to understand on purpose, And they can't see and they won't see. That's the parable of the sower. So he's not interested in teaching them how to keep the Sabbath. He just silences them with this awareness that the new age is here and the old age is passing away. That's all I got for that right now. Oh, no, Lord of the Sabbath, I forgot. Oh, yeah. What a remarkable statement. Right here, we never talked about that. So we don't get the response, but this remarkable statement where he says, the Son of Man, I totally forgot about this, is Lord of the Sabbath. It's his first use of the phrase Son of Man. So when the first time he uses the phrase Son of Man, he says the Son of Man, in addition to all the other things he is Lord of the Sabbath. And so it's this extraordinarily exalted self-understanding. Who did Jesus think he was? He thought he was the Son of Man who was Lord of the Sabbath. So now we have to look at Son of Man, which we've probably done before.
Well, because he used the phrase "Son of Man" in Luke 5, but
He did?
he didn't. Yeah, but and when he said, "But
Oh,
you may
yeah,
know
okay.
that the Son of Man has authority on."
Yeah, I'm
earth to
sorry.
forgive sins,"
I screwed that up.
But he wasn't like explicit about saying that he was talking about
Yeah,
himself.
thank you. Well, no, I mean, he's no more specific. He's no more clear here. He's the only person who ever refers to himself as the Son of Man. So in the last chapter, then he was the Son of Man who forgives sins. In this chapter, he's the Son of Man who is the Lord of the Sabbath. So we're back to this great statement, this great prophecy in Daniel chapter 7. So now he's used Son of Man and Lord in the same sentence. And so you don't tell the Son of Man what Sabbath keeping looks like. The Son of Man tells you not only what Sabbath keeping looks like, but what the very purpose of the Sabbath is in the first place. Okay. I'm gonna hack that up too. What else did I want to say about that? Well, that's enough. Okay, so he's not going to let the Sabbath get in the way of what he calls doing good. Release from captivity. Remember that statement in chapter 4? Go back and look at that real quick. This is all this is the gospel. The good news, right? Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, sent me to proclaim release to the captives. Captives are all kinds of things, are lepers captives, recovery of sight to the blind, free those who are oppressed, proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. It's the Jubilee. We talked about this on Sunday morning in Sunday school class. It's the year of the Jubilee, that 50th year, when it's release. You're released from debts. It's all forgiven. We'll get back into this later, but that's the word that comes to my mind when I see this text from Isaiah, right? Yeah. Jubilee. We'll go back and read that sometime. So now he's jubileeing. He is not only he's proclaiming release to the captives by releasing the captives. If it's in bondage to sin, your sins are forgiven. If it's a man with a withered hand, these people were, the social hierarchy, these people were at the bottom. There's lepers and that. It's awful. We have no concept of it whatsoever. And so, that being bound to that low social strata, where the glass ceiling was right above your head, and you some of them could not walk down the street. What he offers them is, it's hard to bring an example of that in our world, because we don't have a built-in hierarchy like that. We overthrew aristocracy and so forth. But we don't have that caste system like they do in India. Not a formal one. We have our own delineations, right? And operate by it, but it's not formal. And if somebody points it out to you, you go, oh, I shouldn't do that, or no, yeah, that's terrible, you know. There's this implied understanding that it's not good, even if we practice it. But here it was expected. The people below you in the social caste system knew it and acted so. And you didn't like it when they acted your equal. And you knew how to act if you were lower in the social strata. These people are low. Okay, 12 through 16. Moving right along.
It was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named as apostles. Simon, he also named Peter and Andrew his brother, and James and John, and Philip and Bartholomew, and Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon who was called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot who became a traitor.
That's fine. Okay, you could be forgiven for thinking that all of a sudden the disciples were going to take front and center stage and they were going to take the world by storm. They get announced here and then they do nothing. They're just there alongside, usually often not understanding like anybody else. As I've said before, the people that had the closest understanding of who Jesus was have already passed from the scene. The one was Simeon, the prophet. But other than that, you know, these people, they knew something, but none of it was impressive by our standards in terms of enlightenment. So he announces, he names them. I'm not even, what did they think they were being named to? So when they're going to be when they're going to be disciples of a rabbi, these are not doctors of the law. These are not Paul moving from Tarsus to Jerusalem so he can be educated at the feet of Gamaliel, the great Pharisaical leader. This is not that. This is a bunch of fishermen and, you know, artisans, whatever. And they're gathered around this rabbi, and he's now calling them to be his disciples. So what did they think they were being called to? And Luke doesn't straighten it out, and Jesus never straightens it out. And I'm not sure he ever straightened it out with them. Other than the fact that they were going to be followers of the messianic ruler in some way, but they were never going to be doctors of the law. So it had to have been confusing to a lot of people. Rabbis don't call fishermen. Why do rabbis call fishermen? To do what? Teach what? I mean, you know, what's he preparing them for? It's never stated in Luke. He passes on the scene. And then there you just see them in Acts come to full bloom in, you know, somewhere between chapter 2 and chapter 10, you know, but even then you don't even see you're only going to hear from, who do you hear from in here? Again, Peter, James, John, Judas is a betrayer. Andrew disappears. So you don't even, Thomas is in John, the book of John. He has no place in this book. Levi or Matthew, which I believe they're the same person, plays no, he's going to call Matthew in a minute. Levi, it's not called Matthew in this book, I don't think. He's going to disappear. So they all just kind of disappear. I mean, they're going to have the harvest, the laborers to the harvest, and they're going to go out and do that. But then that ends and they disappear again.
Did you say that your translation had him named as Levi and not Matthew?
Yeah.
Mine says Matthew.
Is it the other way around? Where is it?
In verse 15?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, sorry. I need to pay more attention to I need to pay more attention to what I'm thinking and less time to what I'm saying. In Matthew's book, I think he's only called Levi. By the way, I have no pride about people pointing out where I'm wrong. So do that all day long. I'm fine with that. Okay, so he gives them the title. He named them apostles. he's got some kind of a following from which he pulls 12 out. And he knows one of those 12 is the betrayer. He has to know, right? It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. Lucky thing for God that Jesus just happened to pick one who would betray him. No, that man was appointed to betray him in some sense. And so Jesus appointed him to be an apostle for the express purpose of bringing him near him. Somehow, thinking out loud. So, as part of the betrayal itself, he's got the betrayer next to him. Imagine that, however long this was. He's got the betrayer with him the whole time. It's really a remarkable thing when you think about it. So I don't know what they thought they were doing. But they're going to run for cover when he gets crucified. I'll come crashing down. All right. Anybody want to talk about the disciples? And they're coming back for the laborer story, at least, and Peter's there. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. So Simon, he's called Simon here. Simon appears to be his name, his given name. He names him Peter, but he's going to do that later. So this is one of those reading into it now, what he's going to be named later. He's got a third name, which would be I think it's the Aramaic of rock, Cephas. Cephas. That's what Paul calls him, Cephas. So he's got at least three names. They all had more than one name. Simon Peter, who was called Peter or Cephas, I think. I have to go back and look at that. Okay. A little bigger chunk, 12 through 23. See what we can do here.
Well, we just read the disciples
I'm
already.
sorry, 17 through 23. Oh, not so much.
17 through
23.
And he came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. Came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all the crowd sought to touch him, for power came out from him and healed them all. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you and revile you, and spurn your name as evil, on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for so their fathers did to the prophets.
So reversal, right? Consistent with Mary's Psalm of Praise in chapter 1. The poor will be lifted up, the mighty will be taken down, and you see that repeated here. It's fundamental to what was called, I think they call it the Sermon on the Plain or something here. And in Matthew, it's Sermon on the Mount. My guess is it's more than one speaking time, but it doesn't matter. But reversal. So the poor inherit the kingdom of heaven. Hungry will be satisfied, implying that the satisfied will go hungry. James has something to say about that. If you're weeping now, you'll laugh then. If you're ostracized now, you will be vindicated later. So reversal. The new era is about overturning, shattering conventional ways of thinking. These people thought that if you were poor, you were under some kind of penalty from God or punishment from God or curse of God or something like that. That's why it was simply impossible that a ruler of any kind could be crucified. They did not think of that as the martyr's death, farthest thing from it. And so you got to kind of wash all that out of your brain. That was a sign that you were despised and rejected by God, not just by man. And it's the same thing with material. Material blessings were just that, they were blessings. To lack them was, they would have assumed probably that a leper deserved it, or something that he did or his father did or something like that. So he overturns all that. The value system of the world is being turned upside down. In a sense, they bought into this is classic Roman social caste stuff. By definition, the rich were at the top of the social strata, and by definition, the poor are at the bottom of it. That was going to get overturned, and then the poor person could be a monk who could be venerated because of his wisdom sayings or something. I don't know, but that's way in the future. They're great philosophers. They were wealthy. Seneca, they were senators. Cicero, Seneca. I don't know that they were both senators, but these people were up towards the top of the social strata, and they were wealthy. They just went together, and that had seeped in. Even though you can't find it anywhere in the Old Testament, that had seeped into their understanding of their world. And so these Sadducees, that the chief priestly class was an aristocratic class drawn from Sadducees. The other way around. Yeah, that's all together. So the chief priests were Sadducees, and that was the aristocratic class. And the Pharisees were more of the synagogue, the teachers out and about. They were not the ones ruling the country. That was the Sadducees. They were the aristocratic class. This is all of society served to reinforce this social strata, and then by extension, a spiritual strata that went with it at the same time. And the agent of doing it is God himself in the person of Jesus. He is overturning. It is being overturned, and it will also be overturned. It's the already and not yet. The end has already arrived, and the values, he asserts, reflect those of the new era. And he's expecting his disciples to pick up on that. And we don't value anymore. We don't value the way that the world values, nor the way the ruling elites in your country value, and the way that they've taught you to set value either. So when that poor widow shows up, you don't think about her in the same way that they do. That's been overturned. And so you're going to see some of that in Acts. There will be, one of the issues that's going to arise in Acts in chapter 6 is going to be the widows are not being taken care of. The Hellenistic widows are not being taken care of. The Greek speaking, the dispersion, that's a bad way of thinking of it, but the Greek speaking widows are not being taken care of. They're at the expense of the Hebrew widows. And they got to settle all this, because you can't have that kind of valuing in this new age. This new age has new values. And when you see churches like the church in Corinth would have been, it was a cosmopolitan center, commercial center, pagan center. And so these values were just, all of society was immersed in these kinds of values. And so these people are coming out of this, and they're taking that value set, that social strata, into the world of the church. And that's exactly what you're seeing in 1 Corinthians. Paul having to come to grips with a church where they can't leave that social stratification thing, the way they used to set values. They haven't left it behind. The rich are separating themselves and eating. So he says, look, if you're hungry, just eat at home. Well, we can't have that here. You're shaming the poor. And to them, it would have meant nothing. And in their church, I'll bet you in their little gathering, it would have been as natural as could be for the rich to go this way and the poor to go that way. And neither would have thought anything of it. It was an unnatural thing to break that down, and they would have had to work at it to make that happen. It would have been strange to everybody. But it's already starting here. It's got to make its way into the churches. Okay, Jesus both proclaims and embodies this new era. So he's going to have no problem interacting with women and women of low repute. Lepers, dead bodies, you name it. He will put no distance, and attempt to put no distance between himself and any of those things that would be considered at the lower levels of the social strata. Remember that little parable where he says, unless you how does he say it about the children? Unless you welcome, yes, there's that, but there's another one. You have to be like a little child. What, I forget how he says it, but that right there, we just think, innocence, wide-eyed innocence or something like that. No, it's way more than that. Children were down at the bottom. And so the idea that these people should become like children was just, they've never heard anything like that before, either as in Greco-Roman society that's filtered into Palestine, Hellenistic society into Palestine, or into their own synagogue life or anything else. I mean, yeah, it's just a completely different way of thinking. Hard to connect. You find it?
I did find it. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly, I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it."
The kingdom of God belongs to this kind of person, to this. And everybody, I mean, I can imagine right then and there would be people just walk away. You can't make sense of this. You think about what they had, the rich young ruler that comes and says, "What must I do?" And you can just see Jesus looking at him going, "Oh, you have no idea. Your value system, all of it, your whole value system, everything you've been taught about yourself and the world around you and the people around you, it all has to go." And that's behind a statement like, sell everything. He's not just saying you have to give up wealth. He's saying you no longer can think of yourself the way you have to trade all of it in. You are not who you thought. If you want to follow me, you give all of that up and you take the bottom. It's tough words. We got time for one more? Let's go one more. 24 through 26.
Woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for their fathers used to treat the false prophets in the same way. Yeah, this is it should sound echoes of James. So this would be a well understood technique for teaching. Blessed are you, and you can almost see him pointing. Woe to you, and you can see him pointing. And they would have understood this technique of oratory. But look who's woed. The people that are woed are the people that everybody wished that they were. And at the top of that, man, if there was any Sadducees in the vicinity, the aristocratic class, they were all three of these. If they're there, maybe he's pointing right at them. Woe to you who are rich. And he points at their ruling class, not just social class, but religious and political class as well. The chief priest was appointed by the Romans. So it's a political appointment. And you didn't get that appointment by being devout. Hey, says, the legate in Syria or whoever did it, go find me the most devout Jew among the Levites and I'll appoint him as the chief. No, it's buy-offs, it's the corruption thing, it's payoffs and stuff like that. That's how you got that way. Everybody knew it, right? So they're all fit. The whole society is designed for their benefit and for them to succeed. It's rigged. It's a rentier kind of class. I don't know if you've ever heard that. There's companies today that some of our institutions and what do you call it? What's the word for a section of industry, like financial system? The accusation is that they're a rentier class. The systems are designed for them to succeed, so it's stacked in their favor. That's exactly what's going on here, at the expense of
I sound like a communist, at the expense of the people in the lower strata. It's just the people in the lower strata are taught that that's the way it's supposed to be. If you're this way, it's because you're not being blessed of God, and it's because you're a sinner. And you're going to see that word pop up shortly. These are sinners. These are cursed people, cursed by God. That's why they are the way that they are. And so he talks about the rich, the well-fed, and worst of all, the ones that men speak well of, which they value tremendously. The whole point of being in the market and being seen to be praying or fasting and so forth, and having long prayers, there's going to be later woes on this, was so that people could see you do it and praise you for your technique. I don't know, piety. What's the right word? But to conclude this, he's sifting, right? He's creating division within the crowds. This is not easy, says Jesus. Here's the line. We have the blessed and the woed. The blessed are the ones that you're used to thinking of as the cursed, and the woed are the ones that you're used to thinking of as the blessed. All gets overturned, and Jesus is saying there's no room in between. If you want to be my disciple, you're on this side of the line. Sifting, creating division within the crowds. Reversal. The now blessed will be then cursed, and the now cursed will be then blessed. These people all thought that when the day of judgment comes, they get a free pass. They're Israelites. So, there will be no judgment. We're children of Abraham. Jesus puts them back in play. Woe to you. Woe to is used 18 to count. Woe, the phrase woe to is used not accidentally, not coincidentally, 18 times by Isaiah. So there's more Isaiah in this book. So Jesus is both the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy, and he is himself a prophet echoing Isaiah in the grandest traditions of the prophets. He asked the question, what was Jesus fundamentally? One of the correct answers is he was a prophet announcing the kingdom of God and bringing it with him. And along with promise, warning every single time. Those who align themselves with Jesus can become his disciples, can expect opposition and persecution in this world, reward in the next. Those who won't align themselves with him, it's the other way around. So blessed are you when men speak ill of you. You must be doing something right. Today, it's remarkable to watch so many famous evangelicals kind of waffle on it. It's getting really hard to just be left alone as a public figure. I mean, I got to really admire the public Christians that stand their ground. They make it really hard to stand your ground as a public Christian. It's easy for me. Nobody cares what I think or say. But for some of these people, everybody hears it and they just don't give you any quarter on it. It's tough. All right. That's enough of that. It's 8:01. 27 next time. Yeah, we didn't quite finish, huh? It's hard. I mean, unless I was going to spend a bunch of time basically preparing an outline that I just go through. I don't know any other better way to do this. Except to skip sections, but that costs too. Anybody want to talk about anything else? If Blythe was here, she'd want to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and close it down.
Okay.